Imagine the sound of splintering ash echoing across the tilt yard at Greenwich. The year is 1524. Henry VIII, the charismatic, athletic King of England, charges toward the Duke of Suffolk. In our timeline, a minor oversight, a visor left open, resulted in a narrow escape. But today, we are rethinking reality. In this shocking pivot, the lance does not graze the brow. It strikes with the full, devastating force of a charging stallion. The king is down. The Tudor dynasty, once a rising sun, is suddenly eclipsed by a shadow of cold stone and flickering torches. History nerds, you are going to be thrilled by this discovery because everything you think you know about the modern world is about to be rewritten. This revelation is absolutely worth the wait as we explore a reality where the English Reformation never happens. As the smell of salt air from the Thames drifts over a silent, weeping court, we must confront a jarring juxtaposition, a world without the Church of England, without the tragic rise of Anne Boleyn, and without the iconic reign of Elizabeth I. With Henry dead in 1524, he dies a defender of the faith in the eyes of the Vatican, leaving behind a kingdom with no male heir and a massive power vacuum. This isn't just a change in the royal family. It is a fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of Western civilization. If the great matter of the king's divorce never exists, the monasteries are never dissolved, the Latin Mass remains the heartbeat of the English village, and the British Empire is born under the sign of the cross and the authority of the Pope. We are deep diving into a timeline where England remains a loyal province of a Catholic European monolith. How does a young Mary the First descend to a throne surrounded by hungry wolves? How does Cardinal Wolsey, the most powerful man in London, steer a ship of state without its captain? This cinematic journey into a what-if history will challenge your understanding of power, religion, and the fragile threads of fate that hang on a single shattered lance. Stay with us as we uncover the moment the Tudor dynasty collapsed, setting the stage for a Catholic superpower that would dominate the globe for centuries. The silence following the crash of armor at the 1524 joust is more than a momentary shock. It is the sound of a dynasty fracturing. As Henry VIII's life escapes him on the cold, trodden earth, the atmosphere of England transforms instantly. Imagine the flickering torches of Greenwich Palace casting long, dancing shadows over the faces of a council that was never prepared for this shocking pivot. This is a kingdom without a king, and more dangerously, a kingdom without a male heir. At only 8 years old, Princess Mary is the sole surviving child of the Tudor line. The halls of power, usually smelling of roasting meats and expensive perfume, now carry the metallic scent of fear. The year is 1524, and the Great Reformation, the event that would define modern England, is currently nothing more than a whisper in a German monk's mind. Without Henry's desperate drive for a divorce, the political gravity shifts toward the formidable Queen Catherine of Aragon. She is not a discarded wife in this reality. She is the mourning matriarch of a nation on the brink. Rethinking reality means realizing that the power vacuum is not just a local crisis, but a global one. Cardinal Wolsey, the king's brilliant and ambitious right hand, finds himself in a thrilling but perilous position. He must navigate the treacherous waters of a regency council, while the Duke of Norfolk and other hungry nobles circle the young princess like sharks. The immediate vacuum of power creates a chilling question. Will England fall into a second War of the Roses, or will the Habsburg shadow of the Spanish Empire stretch across the English Channel to claim the throne? As the bells of St. Paul's toll for the fallen king, the world watches to see if a woman can hold the crown in a century that fears female rule. The stakes have never been higher, and the ripples of this sudden death are about to overturn every assumption we have about the modern world. But as the council debates, a new figure rises from the grief, a queen who will prove that the Tudor bloodline does not need a man to survive. The sudden silence following the joust of 1524 was more than a mourning period. It was a seismic shift in the tectonic plates of European power. While our timeline sees Catherine of Aragon cast aside in a bitter divorce, this reality presents a shocking pivot that leaves contemporary viewers rethinking reality. Imagine the cold stone halls of Hampton Court, where the flickering torches cast long, dancing shadows over a queen who is no longer a victim, but a strategic titan. Catherine, fueled by the indomitable spirit of her mother, Isabella of Castile, refuses to let the Tudor crown slip into chaos. She assumes the regency for her young daughter, Mary, with a grace that masks a spine of Spanish steel. This is the rise of a matriarchal counter-reformation, a moment that has history nerds thrilled by the sheer logical weight of its implications. The vibes of the English court transform overnight. The crisp, salt air blowing off the Thames now mingles with the heavy, sweet scent of frankincense from constant public masses. Catherine does not just mourn her husband. She orchestrates a new world order. Backed by the immense military and financial might of her nephew, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, she effectively turns England into a Spanish-aligned bastion of the ancient faith. This is not just a change in leadership. It is a profound cultural reset. The Protestant ideas beginning to trickle in from the continent are met not with Henry's intellectual curiosity, but with Catherine's uncompromising devotion. Cardinal Wolsey, the legendary Alter Rex, finds his role brilliantly redefined. In our history, he died in disgrace on a cold journey to London. In this timeline, he becomes the Pope's primary voice in England, a master diplomat securing a future where the English Church remains tethered to Rome with unbreakable chains. The cinematic detail of this era is striking. Picture the young Mary I, not as the traumatized Bloody Mary of our history books, but as a golden princess raised in the absolute certainty of her divine right. As the narration flows into the next chapter, we see that the Reformation is not just delayed, it is being systematically dismantled. The stage is set for a century of Catholic dominance that will alter the global map forever, ensuring the great matter never happens and the Tudor legacy remains holistically Roman. Imagine the flickering torches of Whitehall Palace casting long, dancing shadows over a woman whose name, in our timeline, redefined the course of Western civilization. But in this reality, Anne Boleyn is a ghost of a history that never was. Without the king's obsessive pursuit, the shocking pivot of the 1520s vanishes, leaving us rethinking reality in a world where the English Reformation never ignites. We see Anne not as a tragic martyr or a defiant queen, but as a lady-in-waiting whose sharp wit and French sophistication are relegated to the margins of a forgotten court diary. The cinematic detail of this alternate 1526 is striking. Instead of the high-stakes political chess match for a divorce, the court is filled with the scent of beeswax and the solemn chanting of Latin Mass. And, stripped of her role as a potential queen consort, finds her destiny altered by a simple lack of royal attention. Without the king to break her engagement, the secret betrothal to Henry Percy is allowed to stand. She departs the viper's nest of London for the cold, salt-sprayed ramparts of the north as the Countess of Northumberland. This is a thrilling counterfactual rigor. By removing one man's desire, we see how the gears of history grind to a halt. There is no trial at Westminster, no weeping in the Tower of London, and no executioner brought from Calais. The Boleyn girl remains just that, a girl, then a wife, then a memory. The radical shifts in land ownership and religious identity she unintentionally sparked simply evaporate into the cold morning mist. As Anne fades into the obscurity of a quiet, aristocratic life, the power vacuum in London is not filled by a new dynasty, but by the iron-willed survival of the old guard. The woman who never changed the world leaves behind a kingdom that remains stubbornly, beautifully, and perhaps dangerously Catholic. But as the Bullen's shadow recedes, a new colossus rises from the shadows of the chancel. We must now turn our eyes to the man who truly ruled England in the wake of the king's death, a man who transformed the cross into a scepter. Get ready, because the rise of Cardinal Wolsey is about to change everything. Imagine a world where the most powerful man in England isn't wearing a crown, but a cardinal's hat of shimmering scarlet. With Henry VIII's premature demise in the 1524 tilt, the tectonic plates of European politics undergo a shocking pivot. Thomas Wolsey, the butcher's son who rose to the heights of the church, no longer faces the impossible task of securing an annulment that would eventually lead to his ruin. Instead, he finds himself as the indispensable architect of a regency government, holding the hand of a grieving Queen Catherine. The halls of Hampton Court are no longer a place of romantic intrigue and whispered betrayals. Instead, the vibes are heavy with the scent of expensive incense and the scratching of 1,000 quills. Wolsey is rethinking reality itself. In this timeline, he is the Alter Rex, the other king, without the shadow of an Bullen to undermine his standing. His influence over the English court is absolute. He doesn't just serve the Pope. He becomes the Pope's living voice in London. As you walk through the cold stone corridors of the palace, you feel the weight of this new order. Flickering torches illuminate tapestries depicting a unified Christendom, a visual testament to Wolsey's dream of a peaceful Catholic Europe. Wolsey's genius for diplomacy is now focused on one goal: turning England into the Vatican's most loyal northern bulwark. This isn't just a political shift, it's a cinematic transformation of the English identity. The wealth that would have been seized during the dissolution of the monasteries remains in the hands of the Church, funding a renaissance of Catholic art and architecture that rivals Rome itself. The micro-hook of this era is Wolsey's sheer longevity. Without the stress of the king's great matter, he survives to mold the young Princess Mary into a champion of the ancient faith. He bridges the gap between the Tudor court and the Holy See with such precision that the very idea of a Church of England becomes a forgotten heresy. But this newfound religious stability comes with a strategic price. By binding London to the Vatican, Wolsey is setting the stage for an alliance that will see England integrated into a global Catholic monolith. The scent of salt air from the English Channel carries a new warning. The Spanish are coming, not as invaders, but as the inevitable masters of the English future. Imagine a London where the air smells of Mediterranean spices and the harbors are filled with heavy-timbered Spanish galleons. With Henry VIII resting in a tomb rather than sitting on a throne of defiance, the great matter of his divorce never shatters the peace. Instead, Queen Catherine of Aragon stands as the towering matriarch of a new England, one that is inextricably bound to the most powerful family on earth, the Habsburgs. This is a shocking pivot for those used to the islander identity of Britain. In this timeline, London isn't a rival to Madrid. It is its most vital northern satellite. Rethinking reality, we see English soldiers dressed in Spanish-style steel, marching alongside the famous tercios to suppress rebellions in the Low Countries. The cinematic vibe of the capital transforms entirely. Flickering torches in the Tower of London illuminate diplomatic treaties signed in the names of Catherine and her nephew, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. The strategic shift is profound. England's wealth, once siphoned by Henry's vanity, now flows into a singular, unified Catholic front. Historians would be thrilled to analyze this Habsburg-Tudor axis, a geopolitical monster that effectively turns the English Channel into a Spanish lake. No longer is England a rogue state. It is the cornerstone of a global empire that stretches from the silver mines of Peru to the docks of Bristol. But this alliance came with a heavy price. To be a province of the Habsburgs meant England's domestic policy was often dictated by the needs of Vienna and Toledo. The cold stone of Westminster Abbey echoed with Latin prayers, reinforcing a rigid social order that left no room for dissent. As the 1530s progressed, the ancient faith was not just a religion. It was a cage of gold and iron. As the Spanish influence deepened, a darker cloud was gathering across the sea. In the heart of Germany, a monk named Martin Luther was setting the world on fire. While England stood as a fortified Catholic bastion, the real test was coming. Could this Spanish-Tudor alliance survive the ideological storm that was about to break? Imagine a London where the air is thick not with the smoke of revolutionary ideas, but with the heavy, sweet scent of traditional incense. In this rethinking of reality, the year 1529 does not bring the birth of the Reformation Parliament, but rather a chillingly effective suppression of dissent. Without Henry VIII's desperate search for an annulment, the crown remains the Pope's most lethal weapon. We are witnessing a shocking pivot in European history. The English Channel, once a gateway for radical thought, has been transformed into a great Catholic moat. As you walk the flickering, torch-lit corridors of the Tower, you wouldn't find political prisoners of the King's whim, but rather Lutheran smugglers caught with forbidden German tracts. Under the iron-fisted regency of Catherine of Aragon and the theological brilliance of a triumphant Thomas More, the new learning from Wittenberg is treated not as enlightenment, but as a spiritual plague. Every sentence of Martin Luther's works is systematically purged from the libraries of Oxford and Cambridge. You might be thrilled to realize that in this timeline, the vernacular English Bible, a cornerstone of our modern language, is a contraband item, punishable by the harshest of ecclesiastical laws. The vibes of this era are defined by a monolithic, unbreakable unity between London and Rome. While the German princes fracture the Holy Roman Empire, England stands as an unyielding fortress of the ancient faith. This isn't just a minor change, it's a global redirection. The Reformation, deprived of an English bridgehead, is forced to retreat, lingering only as a localized continental struggle. England's naval power, instead of being used to challenge Catholic hegemony, is now dedicated to blockading the ports of the North Sea, ensuring that no heretical ship ever reaches the salt air of the Thames. By maintaining this absolute spiritual purity, Catherine of Aragon isn't just ruling a nation. She is preserving a medieval world order that should have crumbled. As we look ahead, the stage is set for a succession that history never saw coming, a transition so smooth and so devout that it would leave the Protestant cause in ruins. This is the moment the Tudor dynasty truly became the shield of the Vatican. Imagine a world where the name Mary Tudor doesn't conjure images of smoke and stake, but of golden tapestries and a kingdom at peace. In this shocking pivot of history, Mary's accession isn't a desperate grab for power in a fractured land, but a seamless transition that leaves Europe rethinking reality. By 1537, the throne is hers, not as a disgraced princess fighting for her rights, but as the undisputed pearl of the world. The vibes in London are electric. Instead of the cold fear of the great matter, the air is thick with a sweet smell of frankincense and the triumphant tolling of bells from 1,000 steeples. This is the golden accession. Mary ascends the throne beside her mother, Catherine, who has spent over a decade purifying the realm. There are no martyrs here, no burning heretics, because in this timeline, the heresy never took root. The ancient faith is the bedrock of the English soul, and Mary is its most radiant champion. To the average citizen, this isn't just a coronation, it's a divine validation. As Mary walks through the cold stone corridors of Westminster, flickering torches illuminate a sea of thrilled faces. Her subjects aren't looking for a savior from a tyrant. They are welcoming a symbol of eternal stability. This Mary isn't the bitter, tragic figure history remembers. She is a powerhouse of European diplomacy, the jewel of the Habsburg-Tudor alliance. Under her rule, the monastic houses continue to flourish, their libraries growing, and their influence deep in the English soil. The transition is so smooth, so fundamentally natural, that the very idea of a Protestant England seems like an impossible fever dream. But while Mary basks in this religious and political harmony, a dark question begins to surface in the corners of the court. What of the other daughter? What of the infant who, in our timeline, would become the greatest queen England ever knew? As the Catholic sun reaches its zenith, we must turn our eyes to the shadows of history, to the vanished destiny of a girl named Elizabeth. Imagine the cold stone corridors of Hatfield House, not as the bustling nursery of a future titan, but as a silent, drafty wing of a secondary palace. In this timeline, the woman who defined the English identity simply does not exist. It is a shocking pivot that forces us into rethinking reality. The Elizabethan age is a phantom, a ghost story of a world that never was. Without Henry VIII's obsessive pursuit of Anne Boleyn, the concubine remains a mere lady-in-waiting, eventually married off to a minor nobleman in the shadows of the court. The flame-haired princess who would have defied the Spanish Armada is never even conceived. Instead, the English court is bathed in the flickering torches of a permanent Catholic orthodoxy. The vibes of this era are heavy with the smell of incense and the weight of Latin liturgy, rather than the salt-sprayed adventure of the Protestant privateers. We are thrilled to explore this vacuum of power, for in the absence of Elizabeth, the very concept of the English Renaissance undergoes a radical transformation. Without her patronage, figures like William Shakespeare and Edmund Spenser must find new, perhaps more pious, themes to explore under the watchful eye of a Mediterranean-aligned monarchy. The cinematic detail of this lost era is haunting. We see a London where the Globe Theatre might never have flourished without the specific political tensions of the Reformation to fuel its dramas. The ghost of Elizabeth represents the greatest lost potential in human history, a leader of peerless intellect who remains locked away in the what-if of the cosmic archive. As we look at the quiet, stable, yet culturally stagnant England of the late 16th century, we realize that the absence of a struggle for the throne created a peace that was, in many ways, a velvet cage. This shocking pivot away from the Virgin Queen's legacy leads us directly to the next revelation. With the English crown firmly tethered to the Vatican, the very maps of the world were about to be redrawn. If you thought the Tudor era was predictable, prepare to be stunned as we look toward the looming horizon of the French invasion. Imagine standing atop the cold, windswept cliffs of Dover in 1545. The air is thick with the scent of salt and the metallic tang of sharpened steel. In our timeline, England stood isolated, a heretic nation braced for a Spanish fury that would not arrive for decades. But in this reimagined reality, the shocking pivot occurs not from the south, but from the north. King Francis I of France, sensing a moment of perceived Tudor vulnerability under the matriarchal rule of Queen Mary I, launches the most ambitious naval invasion in European history. This is the moment where we are forced into rethinking reality. England is no longer a rogue island, but the vital northern bastion of the Catholic fortress. As the horizon blooms with the white sails of the French fleet, the response is not one of panicked isolation, but of a unified, ironclad imperial wall. Because Henry VIII died before the Great Schism, the Royal Navy, now funded by the staggering wealth of the Vatican and bolstered by Spanish galleons, is a different beast entirely. We witness a cinematic clash of titans in the Solent, where the vibes of medieval chivalry meet the brutal dawn of gunpowder warfare. The French expect a fractured kingdom, but they encounter a nation where the church and the crown are fused in a holy alliance. The defense of England becomes a European crusade. Spanish veterans line the beaches alongside English longbowmen, creating a hybrid military force that the Valois dynasty never anticipated. This victory doesn't just repel an invader. It cements England's role as the indispensable protector of the faith in the north. The smell of smoke over the Channel marks the end of French maritime ambitions and the beginning of a terrifyingly stable Anglo-Spanish hegemony. As the French retreat, shattered and broken, the geopolitical map of Europe is rewritten in an instant. England has survived not as an underdog, but as the armored fist of Rome, setting the stage for a financial and religious integration that will change the face of the globe forever. Next, we dive into how this victory paved the way for a shocking economic transformation: Rome's iron grip on the English treasury. With the French invasion shattered and the Tudor-Habsburg alliance solidified, England's path shifted from isolation toward a shocking pivot into total ecclesiastical integration. While Henry VIII's real-world history saw him stripping the monasteries of their wealth, our alternate timeline reveals a London under the absolute financial stewardship of the Holy See. This is a reality where the Vatican's iron grip transformed the English economy into the most lucrative province of the Catholic world. Imagine the sights of 16th century London. The air is thick with the scent of incense and the salt of the Thames, but the most dominant sound isn't the clatter of industry. It is the scratch of quills in the counting houses of Rome's legates. The legendary Peter's pence tax, once a modest contribution, has evolved into a sophisticated financial network. In this world, the English monasteries were never dissolved. Instead, they became the central banks of the North. Rethinking reality, we see that the vast lands owned by the Church, nearly a third of all English soil, remained under the direct supervision of Rome. This wasn't just religious influence, it was a total economic monopoly. Italian bankers and papal administrators flooded into London, bringing with them the double-entry bookkeeping of the Medici and the cold, unyielding logic of Roman debt. The cinematic contrast is striking. While the rest of the world might see England as a fortress of faith, the merchants of the City of London see a golden cage. The wealth that would have funded a private English empire is instead funneled toward the construction of St. Peter's Basilica and the defense of the Mediterranean against the Ottomans. Every flickering torch in the dark alleys of the East End illuminates a city where the Pope's crest is stamped on every coin and ledger. This financial dominance ensured that London remained a satellite of the Italian Renaissance, wealthy beyond measure, but tethered to the will of the pontiff. But as the coffers overflowed, a new question emerged. How could nations so financially bound to the Mediterranean ever hope to rule the Atlantic? The answer lies in a shocking strategic shift that would redefine the seas forever. Step onto the windswept docks of Portsmouth in 1545, where the smell of salt air mingles with the heavy scent of burning incense. We are rethinking reality in a shocking pivot that turns traditional history on its head. In our timeline, Henry VIII's navy was the shield of a defiant Protestant island. But in this world, the English fleet is the heavy sword of the Vatican. Thrilled by the prospect of an obedient England, Rome does not bleed the country dry. Instead, it invests. Picture the cinematic detail of the Sanctus Petrus, a massive galleon funded by Peter's pence and blessed by the Pope himself. With the wealth of the monasteries preserved and integrated into the Roman financial system, England becomes the shipyard of the Counter-Reformation. Cold stone shipyards ring with the sound of hammers as English oak is transformed into the primary naval defense of the Catholic fortress. This is the naval paradox. The very ships that would have fought the Spanish Armada in 1588 are now sailing alongside them as brothers in arms. The geopolitical landscape shifts violently. Rather than a seafaring underdog, England is the maritime enforcer of the Mediterranean axis. This shocking pivot means the North Sea is no longer a gateway for Lutheran ideas, but a guarded moat protecting the ancient faith. Under flickering torches in the Admiralty, plans are drawn not for the colonization of Virginia, but for the systematic blockade of rebellious Protestant ports in the Low Countries. England's sailors, once the vanguard of a new, independent world, are now the crusaders of the Atlantic. They are the Pope's privateers, tasked with ensuring that no heretical book or rogue preacher ever reaches the shores of Britain. The naval might that once built an empire for the crown now preserves a spiritual empire for the church. But while the seas are secured, what of the land itself? As we look inward, we find a landscape transformed by the very institutions Henry tried to destroy. The fate of the monasteries is not a story of ruins, but of a kingdom reclaiming its treasures. Close your eyes and picture the English countryside. In our timeline, it is dotted with the romantic, skeletal remains of Tintern and Fountains Abbey, hollowed-out stone shells reclaimed by ivy. But in this reality, the site is a shocking pivot that has historians rethinking reality. Instead of ruins, we find a landscape where the bells of over 800 monasteries still chime, their golden spires gleaming under the English sun. Because Henry VIII died before his great matter, the dissolution of the monasteries never occurred. These were not just places of prayer, they were the spiritual and economic engines of the kingdom. Walk through the gates of Glastonbury in the 16th century, and you aren't met with silence, but with the scent of beeswax and the low hum of hundreds of monks preserving the treasures of the West. You would be thrilled by the sheer opulence, flickering torches reflecting off massive silver reliquaries and libraries that make the Vatican jealous. Without the land grab of the 1530s, the English gentry never rose to power on the back of stolen church property. Instead, the monasteries remained the ultimate landlords, providing a social safety net that prevented centuries of rural poverty. The cold stone of these cathedrals didn't become a quarry for local manor houses. They became fortified centers of literacy and medical care. This preservation creates a cinematic continuity with the Middle Ages that anchors the English identity to the heart of Rome. However, as these religious houses grew in wealth, they became more than just sanctuaries. They became the Vatican's private banks on English soil, ensuring that the king could never truly act without the church's blessing. This internal stability, bought with monastic gold, provided the crown with a unique opportunity to look toward the horizon. If the English heartland was now a unified Catholic fortress, what did that mean for the restless neighbors across the Irish Sea? The answer would redefine the British Isles forever. As we move from the cloisters of England to the green hills of an Ireland that would never know the sting of the Cromwellian sword. Imagine the rolling green hills of Ireland, not as a landscape scarred by the trenches of sectarian warfare, but as a thriving, tranquil heart of a unified Catholic archipelago. In our timeline, the Tudor conquest of Ireland was a brutal collision of faith and identity, leaving wounds that would bleed for 5 centuries. But in this shocking pivot of reality, where Henry VIII perishes in a 1524 jousting accident, the Irish question is answered before it is even asked. With London remaining the Vatican's most loyal northern outpost, the religious friction that fueled historical horrors and centuries of strife simply evaporates into the salt air of St. George's Channel. There is no Protestant plantation because there are no Protestant lords to plant. Instead, we witness a breathtaking religious union. The flickering torches of Christ Church Cathedral in Dublin illuminate a scene of unprecedented harmony. Gaelic chieftains and English deputies kneeling side by side, united by the Latin Mass that echoes from Rome to the Giant's Causeway. History nerds will find this logical shift absolutely thrilling. The great monasteries of Ireland, places like Mellifont and Cashel, are not reduced to ruins. They remain the intellectual and economic engines of the island. Rather than being suppressed, the Irish language and culture are filtered through the prism of continental Catholicism, becoming a prestigious training ground for the church's elite. The vibes of this era are transformative. Imagine the smell of incense mingling with the Atlantic mist, as a unified fleet of Irish and English ships patrols the western seas, not as enemies, but as the Pope's primary defenders. Without the penal laws to stifle the population, the Irish gentry remains intact, creating a seamless social hierarchy that mirrors the English court. This isn't just a different history. It is a rethinking of reality where the Emerald Isle is never broken by the wheel of the Reformation. As we look across this peaceful landscape, we must ask, how does this unified Catholic front change the race for the Americas? The answer lies in the shocking expansion that followed, as two nations sail under one cross toward a new world. Imagine standing on the docks of Bristol in 1560. The air is thick with the smell of salt and the heavy scent of incense, as a dockside mass concludes before the fleet sets sail. In this timeline, you do not see the ragtag privateers of a heretic queen looking to plunder. Instead, you witness the shocking pivot of a world where the English lion and the Spanish cross fly side by side. This is the New World monopoly, a cinematic shift that redefines the map of the globe. Without the break from Rome, the Treaty of Tordesillas is no longer a barrier for England to overcome. It is an invitation to the greatest joint venture in human history. Under the stable, unified reign of Mary I and her husband, Philip II of Spain, the Atlantic Ocean becomes a private lake for the House of Habsburg and their Tudor allies. Thrilled by the prospect of global conversion, the Vatican issues a revolutionary new bull, partitioning the vast reaches of North America not as a contested wilderness, but as a sacred trust for a loyal England. Rethinking reality, we see the familiar forests of Virginia replaced by New London, a sprawling colonial capital defined by towering Jesuit colleges and ornate stone cathedrals. There are no pilgrims fleeing persecution because there is no religious persecution to flee. The Great Migration of the 1620s simply never happens. Instead, the English expansion is professional, militaristic, and deeply orthodox. The legendary sea dogs like Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh, who in our world burned Spanish ports, are here reimagined as the Pope's most elite admirals. They spend their careers escorting massive gold galleons from the Caribbean directly into London's burgeoning banks, which have become the counting houses of the Counter-Reformation. The cinematic detail is striking. Picture flickering torches in a London map room where cardinal ministers and Spanish ambassadors carve up the Mississippi River with a stroke of a quill. They aren't rivals, they are brothers in arms. This unified Catholic expansion creates a crushing monopoly that effectively locks the Dutch and the French out of the hemisphere for a century. The American dream is rewritten from one of individual liberty to one of collective devotion to the Mother Church. But as this unimaginable wealth flows into Tudor coffers, a new question arises. How will this power reshape the Crown's relationship with the North? We must now look to the misty borders of Scotland, where a different kind of union is about to be forged. Imagine a world where the border between England and Scotland is not a jagged scar of religious warfare, but a bridge of shared devotion. In this shocking pivot of history, the union of the crowns occurs not as a desperate political compromise between rival faiths, but as a grand Catholic reunification of the British Isles. Without the tragic execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, who, in this reality, remains a cherished ally and heir to her English cousins, The Stuart accession in 1603 feels less like a foreign takeover and more like a divine homecoming. We are rethinking reality here. A Britain united under a single cross, sanctioned by Rome, creating a monolithic fortress of faith that dominates the North Atlantic. The cinematic vibes of this era are transformative. Imagine the cold, ancient stone of Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh illuminated by the same flickering tapers that light the altars of Westminster Abbey. This is the Stuart Union, a different path to the United Kingdom, where the Great Britain of the 17th century is a theological superpower, unchallenged by the internal dissent that plagued our own timeline. Historians are thrilled by the counterfactual rigor of this scenario. Without the Kirk's Presbyterian rebellion in Scotland or the rise of the Puritan movement in London, the Stuart dynasty never faces the shadow of the executioner's axe. Instead, they rule a sacred isle with absolute authority. The smell of salt air from a unified royal fleet, manned by sailors who pray to the same saints, signals the end of the border reivers and the beginning of a cohesive imperial identity. This isn't just a political merger. It is a spiritual consolidation that turns the British Isles into the Vatican's most potent sword in the north. However, as the Stuarts solidify their grip on this united kingdom, a darker necessity emerges. To maintain this newfound holy unity, the crown must now look inward, purging any lingering embers of dissent. This leads us to a chilling revelation. To keep a kingdom pure, one must often turn to the flame. Prepare yourself, because the next chapter explores the terrifying rise of the English Inquisition. Imagine a London where the air isn't thick with the smoke of revolutionary ideas, but the heavy scent of frankincense and the crushing weight of absolute spiritual law. In this timeline, the English Inquisition isn't a foreign horror story. It is the bedrock of British stability. By the mid-16th century, while the rest of Europe fractured under the weight of a Lutheran crisis, England stood as a monolithic fortress of the ancient faith. With the Stuart-Tudor union solidified under the watchful eye of Rome, the office of the protector of the faith was established. This wasn't merely a court. It was a shocking pivot toward a surveillance state that would make even the Habsburgs envious. Picture the damp, cold stone of the Tower of London, no longer a prison for fallen queens, but a humming hive of theological investigators. Under flickering torchlight, the bishop's men sifted through forbidden manuscripts, ensuring that the vernacular Bible remained a dangerous myth. For the average citizen, rethinking reality was a life-threatening gamble. This cinematic transformation of English society created a chillingly efficient environment. To the outside world, London was a beacon of order, a Mediterranean-style capital where the salt air of the Thames mingled with the liturgical chants of 1,000 thriving monasteries. But beneath the surface, the price of this peace was the systematic erasure of dissent. Secret printing presses were smashed before they could even whisper a word of rebellion. The English Inquisition became the ultimate tool of the crown, a religious police force that ensured the island remained a sacred isle. But this absolute control came with a hidden cost that would soon reach a breaking point. As the 17th century dawned, the rigid orthodoxy that had preserved the Tudor legacy began to act as a chokehold on the very minds needed to navigate a changing world. While the faith was secure, the gears of innovation were grinding to a halt. The stage was set for a shocking stagnation that would leave the British Isles questioning the cost of their spiritual purity, a cinematic collision between ancient dogma and the dawning light of a suppressed reason. A step into the cold, stone corridors of 17th century Oxford. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and old parchment, but beneath the quiet study lies a palpable tension. In our timeline, England was the cradle of the Enlightenment, a place where the Royal Society dared to question the very fabric of the cosmos. But in this reality, a world where the Tudor line remained fiercely loyal to Rome, the shocking pivot is not a lack of brilliance, but the stifling redirection of it. The scientific revolution hasn't just slowed, it has been redirected into a theological labyrinth. Imagine the thrill of a young scholar rethinking reality through a forbidden lens, only to find the shadow of the English Inquisition looming over his desk. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Vatican's list of banned books, is the most influential document in London. Knowledge is no longer a public pursuit. It is a sacred privilege. Figures like Isaac Newton or Francis Bacon find themselves walking a razor-thin tightrope. In this timeline, the apple may still fall, but explaining why it does so without attributing every motion to a direct act of divine will is a dangerous heresy. We see a cinematic shift in the landscape of innovation. While the Protestant north of Europe begins to experiment with steam and optics, England remains a beautiful, stagnant masterpiece of Gothic tradition. The scientific stall means that the industrial spirit is sacrificed at the altar of spiritual purity. This creates a chilling atmosphere where telescopes are viewed with suspicion, and the printing presses are tightly regulated by cardinal censors. As the rest of the continent begins to flicker with the light of empirical reason, England's intellectual fire is kept strictly within the hearth of the Church. But as we will see, this suppression only serves to turn the pursuit of truth into an underground rebellion, setting the stage for a conflict that will determine the fate of the modern world. How does a kingdom lead a global empire when its greatest minds are forbidden from looking too closely at the stars? Imagine the flickering torchlight reflecting off the cold stone of a clandestine cellar in London. A group of men huddle in the damp, their breath visible in the chill air, passing around a single hand-copied scroll. This is not a political manifesto. It is a translation of the Gospel of Mark into English. In this timeline, such a document is a death warrant. Without Henry VIII's break from Rome, the Great Bible of 1539 was never commissioned. The shocking pivot here is that the English language remains a vulgar tongue, relegated to the fields and the markets, while Latin remains the ironclad gatekeeper of the divine and the scholarly. Rethinking reality means realizing that the explosion of literacy seen in our world, driven by the Protestant desire for every man to read the Word of God, is utterly absent. Instead, we see a kingdom where the Index Librorum Prohibitorum is the law of the land. The vibes of this era are heavy with the scent of incense and the weight of silence. The English Inquisition ensures that the Tyndale Bibles of the world are burned before they can even reach the docks. This leads to a massive cultural stagnation. Without a standardized English Bible, the language remains fractured into regional dialects, lacking the cohesion that eventually birthed the works of the Bard. While the elites speak the fluid melodic Latin of the Vatican, the commoner is trapped in a pre-literate darkness. You would be thrilled by the sheer mystery of the era, but horrified by the cost. This linguistic divide creates a rigid class structure that makes social mobility nearly impossible. As the printing presses of Europe churn out the Enlightenment, England's presses are chained by the clergy, producing only liturgical texts and theological treatises. This cinematic suppression of the vernacular ensures that the English mind is tethered to Rome, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation between the underground bookmen and the suffocating orthodoxy of the state. As we look toward the horizon, we see London not as a global center of trade and thought, but as a provincial gateway to the Holy Roman Empire, forever bowing to the Latin cross. Picture a London that has turned its back on the gray mists of the North Sea, looking instead toward the sun-drenched courts of Madrid and Rome. By the mid-16th century, the Mediterranean axis has completely reshaped the English capital. As you walk the docks of the Thames, the atmosphere is electric. You aren't just hearing the rough dialects of East Anglia, but the melodic cadence of Castilian Spanish and the authoritative tones of Latin-speaking legates. This is a shocking pivot in global geography. Under the ironclad alliance between Queen Mary and her Habsburg kin, England has transitioned from a peripheral island to the northern gateway of the Holy Roman Empire. The cold stone of the Tower of London now plays host to imperial ambassadors who see Britain not as a rival, but as a vital fortress protecting the Catholic seas. The salt air of the Channel is thick with the masts of the Spanish treasure fleet, making London a crucial node in a trade network that stretches from the silver mines of Peru to the spice markets of the Levant. This rethinking of reality means that the English economy is no longer tied to the volatile markets of Northern Europe, but is instead fueled by the immense wealth of a Catholic hegemony. Flickering torches in the counting houses of Lombard Street illuminate maps, where London sits at the center of a unified papal world. But this prosperity comes with a cinematic weight. The city feels less like a sovereign capital and more like a gilded province of an empire that never sets. As the Spanish galleons bob in the dark water, the stage is set for a confrontation that will define the century. If England is the gateway to the empire, what happens when the remnants of the Protestant North decide to break that gate down? The peace of the Mediterranean axis is about to face its greatest challenge yet, as we look toward the gathering storms of the Great Northern War. The year is 1562, and the cold stone walls of the Tower of London no longer echo with the cries of executed queens, but with the rhythmic scratching of quills charting a crusade. We are rethinking reality as we know it. In this timeline, the Reformation is not a triumphant revolution, but a flickering candle struggling against a hurricane. The air is thick with the smell of salt air and gunpowder as the English Navy, now the sword of the church, prepares for a shocking pivot that will change the face of Europe forever. With Henry VIII long dead and his daughter Mary the first reigning alongside her Habsburg husband, England has become the iron fist of the Counter-Reformation. As we look at the maps of the era, the Great Northern War looms, a conflict where the Tudor-Habsburg alliance seeks to extinguish the heretical embers in Scandinavia and the Baltic states once and for all. For the history nerds watching, the counterfactual rigor here is undeniable. Without England as a Protestant sanctuary, the German princes are isolated, and the Swedish crown stands alone. The vibes of this era are cinematic and grim. Flickering torches illuminate war rooms where London and Madrid coordinate the movement of hundreds of ships. It is a thrilling, albeit chilling, realization that the very fleet Henry VIII built to protect his pride is now being used to enforce the Pope's will in the North Sea. The Protestant resistance, led by a desperate house of Veza, watches the horizon with terror. They expected a divided Christendom, but they face a unified Catholic monolith. This was not merely a war for territory. It was a war for the soul of the West. When the English sails appeared off the coast of Copenhagen, it signaled the end of the Reformation's dream. The crushing weight of the Tudor Spanish Armada proved that when England remained in the fold, the ancient faith was immovable. This micro-hook of history reminds us that a single joust in 1524 didn't just save a king's life. It condemned a revolution to the shadows of history. As the Baltic waters turned crimson, the world realized that the Northern Lights would henceforth shine only on a Catholic empire, setting the stage for a global hegemony that no one, not even the boldest explorers, could hope to escape. Imagine standing atop the white cliffs of Dover in the late summer of 1588. In our timeline, this was a moment of peak existential dread for England, as the horizon bristled with the masts of the Spanish Armada, a floating forest of oak and iron sent to crush the Protestant spirit. But in this reality, the Channel is eerily calm. There is no fire ship chaos at Gravelines, no desperate prayer to the winds. and no defiant speech at Tilbury. The world's greatest sea battle never happened because there was no one left to fight. By staying true to Rome, the Tudor dynasty didn't just survive, it thrived as the northern anchor of a Catholic superpower. Rethinking reality means realizing that the English and Spanish fleets, instead of shattering one another in a storm-tossed graveyard, are now riding at anchor in the same harbors. The smell of salt air and wet hemp permeates the docks of Plymouth, where English sailors and Spanish Marines share rations under the combined banners of the Tudor Rose and the Burgundian Cross. This is a shocking pivot. The naval genius of Drake and Hawkins, once used to pirate Spanish gold, has been redirected to enforce the Vatican's will. The absent Armada represents a chilling silence in history, the vacuum where the British Empire's independent maritime identity should have been. Instead of a sovereign of the seas born from conflict, we see a joint police force that has turned the Atlantic into a private Catholic lake. The cinematic detail of this era is staggering. Picture the flickering torches of a London wharf, not lighting the way for secret Jesuit priests, but illuminating the massive construction of galleons of a faith destined to keep the New World in an iron grip. This Anglo-Spanish hegemony means the very concept of naval liberty is strangled in the cradle. Every ship on the horizon is an instrument of the Inquisition's global reach. As we look at this unified front, we must ask, if the two greatest naval powers of the age are brothers in arms, who is left to challenge them? The answer lies further west, where the map of the world is being redrawn in the colors of a single faith, leading us toward a global map of 1,800 that looks nothing like the one in our textbooks. As the year 1800 dawns, the global map is a stunning testament to a world where the English Reformation never happened. Rethinking reality becomes necessary when you gaze upon the cartography of this alternate era. In the cold, stone halls of the Escorial and the flickering torchlight of a Catholic Westminster, the ink on the maps is still wet, outlining a world dominated not by competing colonial powers, but by a dual hegemony that has crushed the very idea of revolution. The first shocking pivot is the Americas. Without a Protestant England to challenge the Treaty of Tordesillas, the New World is a monolithic Catholic bastion. There is no Virginia, no Massachusetts, and certainly no United States. Instead, the viceregal provinces of the North stretch from the frozen Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico, governed by a joint Anglo-Spanish administration. The smell of salt air and expensive spices fills the ports of New London, where the Spanish flag and the Tudor Rose fly side by side in a display of maritime dominance. By 1800, the two dynasties, the Habsburgs of the continent and the Tudor Stuarts of the Isles, have effectively carved up the globe. This isn't just a political alliance, it is a spiritual iron curtain. The Enlightenment, as we know it, was strangled in its crib. While the scientific method exists, it is practiced within the strict confines of Jesuit universities. Scholars are thrilled by the discovery of new stars, but they are cautious to frame their findings within the eternal truth of the Church. The Great Northern War of the 17th century successfully extinguished the last embers of Lutheranism in Scandinavia, leaving a Europe that is culturally and religiously uniform. This global stability, however, hides a simmering tension between the two titans. The maritime world controlled by London and Lisbon faces off against the land world of Vienna and Madrid. As we look at the borders of 1800, we see a planet that is orderly, devout, and terrifyingly static. It is a world where the individual path is dictated by a throne and an altar, a shocking departure from the democratic explosions of our own timeline. Imagine standing on the banks of the Thames in the year 2024. In our world, the London skyline is a jagged glass testament to secular capitalism. But in this timeline, The shocking pivot is the site of the great Cathedral of St. Henry, its spire soaring higher than any skyscraper, topped with a cross of solid gold that reflects the setting sun. We are rethinking reality as we witness a 21st century where the Tudor legacy is not a museum piece, but a living, breathing Catholic superpower. The vibes of this era are a cinematic blend of the hypermodern and the ancient. Think of high-speed maglev trains gliding past monasteries that have remained active for 500 years. Their cold stone walls now housing the servers of a global theological network. You might be thrilled by the sheer stability of this world. Without the religious wars that tore Europe apart, the Tudor-Stuart dynasty presides over a global Catholic commonwealth that stretches from the tech hubs of New London in the Americas to the sacred sites of the Holy Land. There was no American Revolution, no French guillotine, and no fractured West. Instead, we see a world governed by a sophisticated, high-tech version of divine right. The smell of salt air from the world's most powerful navy, the Papal Tudor fleet, reminds every nation that the sea belongs to the Church. It is a world of incredible order and breathtaking architectural beauty, where the scientific revolution was filtered through the lens of faith, creating a unique theological enlightenment. This is the ultimate counterfactual rigor, a world that traded the chaos of democracy for the enduring peace of a crown that never broke. As we look upon this global empire, we see the echoes of that fateful 1524 joust. The modern Tudor legacy is one of absolute continuity, a shocking departure from our own timeline that forces us to wonder if our modern freedoms were worth the centuries of conflict that followed the Reformation. The golden age of the Tudors never ended. It simply evolved into a digital global and eternal reign that defines the modern era. As we stand amidst the simulated splendor of a Catholic London that never fell, we must confront a chilling truth. The bedrock of our modern world is as fragile as a single jousting lance. We have spent this journey rethinking reality, witnessing how the absence of Henry VIII's great matter transformed a small island into the beating heart of a global, faith-driven empire. The shocking pivot of 1524 reminds us that history is not a series of inevitable waves, but a mosaic of human choices and accidents. The flickering torches of the Tudor court illuminate a reality where the Reformation was never a historical necessity, but a tragedy of one man's ego. In this alternate 21st century, the air smells of ancient incense and salt air from a unified global fleet, a world where the scientific revolution was guided by the steady hand of the Church rather than the chaos of secular revolution. It is a world of breathtaking order and terrifying continuity. As we gaze upon the map of 1800, divided not by democratic upheaval, but by dynastic loyalty, we are forced to ask if our own timeline is the anomaly. Was the England we know, the England of Elizabeth, the Industrial Revolution, and the break with Rome, merely a fluke of survival? The cinematic detail of this timeline, from the gold leaf spires of a modern Vatican London to the silent, unwritten history of Anne, serves as a haunting reminder. History is a cold, stone corridor where one door closes and another opens with the snap of a neck or the miss of a blade. We leave you with this final, thrilling revelation. You are living in just one version of a billion possible worlds, and the only thing standing between this reality and the next is the heartbeat of a king. If Henry had fallen just a few inches differently, the world you know would vanish into the shadows of a history that never was.